So it's been about 3 months since the iPhone 16 Pro Max was released, and here are my thoughts on it after using it since launch day. There's a lot to discuss, so let's just get to it. I'm gonna split this video into these categories, so feel free to jump around. The last truly revolutionary change in the iPhone's design occurred with the iPhone 10 in 2017. Since then, every single iPhone has evolved from that design. The iPhone 12 went with flat edges, and then the 15 Pro introduced titanium instead of stainless steel. But there hasn't been any major changes since the iPhone 10. To quote Steve Jobs, design is not what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. I don't see the similarity in design as a problem. If it is not broken, don't fix it. Compared to the 15 Pro Max, the 16 Pro Max is about 6 grams heavier. This does not sound like much, but I feel it in the hand. The 15 Pro Max was a much nicer phone to hold in the hand. The 16 Pro Max is also about 0.2 inches larger than the 15 Pro Max, which isn't immediately apparent, but when you pick up the 15 Pro Max afterwards, you notice the slightly larger display and the thinner bezels on the 16. The 16 Pro Max is lighter than the 14 Pro Max, so if you're upgrading from the 14 Pro Max or earlier, this phone feels like it's defying physics. Smaller bezels, lighter weight, and a bigger display, but when compared with the 15 Pro Max, the change isn't that much. And overall, I still prefer the design of the 15 Pro Max. Ideally, I would have liked the 16 Pro Max to have the same screen size as the 15 Pro Max to avoid any weight gain. But I can appreciate the larger battery. If we were to conduct a survey, I'm sure most people would opt for a bigger screen and a bigger battery. I will be in the minority. That said, I hope this is as large as iPhones get. At 6.9 inches, we are close to a 7-inch phone, and I hope the next design iteration does not bring a larger phone. The display on the 16 Pro Max is pretty much unchanged from last year, except for the 1 nit minimum brightness, where the screen actually gets much darker, and it is great for when you are using the phone at bed at night. Apart from that, it's still a great display that you expect from iPhones. No complaints here. The colors on the 16 Pro Max are still very grayish. I purchased the Desert Titanium color only because I wanted a change from the natural titanium from last year. The natural titanium is still the best color in my opinion. I know this has been said many times, but I wish Apple would release colorful iPhones in their Pro lineup too. The best color iPhone this year is the ultramarine iPhone 16. It looks great. Apple has claimed that the 16 Pro Max has the best battery life on an iPhone, and I do agree with them. After using all the high-end iPhones released in the past decade, the 13 Pro Max had the best battery life if you ask me. But I'm happy to report the 16 Pro Max is now back as the king of the iPhone battery life. I set my phone to charge to 80% of the battery, and that is more than adequate for my daily use, except on the days where I know I'm going to take a lot of pictures. Then I do charge my phone to the full 100%. After 3 months of using this phone, this iPhone still has 100% battery life capacity. I'm not going to do a Geekbench comparison of how great the single core and multi-core performance of the A18 Pro chip is, but this iPhone is no slouch, which is true of the iPhone before that and the iPhone before that. iPhones were never slow to begin with, and it is very true this year too. The new processor also allows for new features, like 4K 120fps video recording and a faster neural engine for Apple Intelligence. But in my opinion, the iPhone is not necessarily about what it can do today. It is about being able to keep up in, say, 5 years' time. It is about future-proofing. There is a lot of legroom for the future when operating system demands more processing power. And if history is any indication, this phone will still deliver in half a decade's time. I say this as someone who upgrades to a new phone every year. But if I don't and decide to do the sensible thing of upgrading only when needed, I know this phone that I have in hand will still be as fast as in years to come. The iPhone 15 Pro Max did have an overheating problem. I personally wasn't really affected by it, but it was a problem for many people. The 15 Pro Max did get a bit hot to the touch. I feel like I haven't really pushed my 16 Pro Max to its maximum, but the phone does not get as hot as my 15 Pro Max, which is a good thing. Apple did add a graphite sheet to the internals of the 16 Pro Max, and this has definitely helped with the thermals. The last few years of iPhone Pro upgrades have mostly been about the camera, and this year is no different. Talking about the camera is what Apple spends most of its time on the keynote. It is the reason I tell myself I need an iPhone every year. So let's talk about the camera. The main camera is now called the Fusion camera and has a faster sensor. Pair this with the A18 Pro chip, taking photos in ProRAW now feels noticeably faster than last year's 15 Pro Max. This is a welcome change. Not that the 15 Pro Max or even the 14 Pro Max was a slouch when taking RAW pictures. But the 16 Pro Max is noticeably faster if you're trying to take a photo of something that moves, say like a bird. You can get faster shots in before you lose your subject. The ultra-wide lens compared to the 15 Pro Max does get an upgrade. The sensor is now 48 megapixels. However, in my day-to-day use, the photos look very similar to the 15 Pro Max. There's a bit more detail in the macro shots, but it isn't worthy of being wowed or anything like that. In low light conditions, the new 48 megapixel ultra-wide does not switch to the night mode as often compared to the 15 Pro Max, resulting in photos that look closer to real life, as in the photos still look like they were taken at night. But in terms of personal artistic choice, I prefer the night mode on the 15 Pro Max. However, when you manually turn on night mode, the photos on the 16 Pro Max do tend to look better. The 5x telephoto lens is unchanged from last year, which is a shame because it is my favorite lens on an iPhone yet. It gives you great zoom and lets you take really cool photos with background compression. I would have loved to see some change in this lens, but I guess we have to wait till next. On a side note, I'm glad the smaller iPhone Pro also now gets the 5x lens. The camera system on the 16 Pro Max produces images very similar to the 15 Pro Max, which produced great photos. I've been shooting exclusively in ProRAW since the iPhone 14 Pro Max a couple of years ago, and the photos do tend to look great. The camera control button was the biggest feature that Apple spent time talking about during the iPhone keynote. Yes, I know Apple doesn't call it a button, but for now let's call it what it is. I have a lot of thoughts on the camera control button, so I'm going to make a full video dedicated to it, and that should drop in the next 2 weeks. So if you like, please do hit the subscribe button so you know when it drops. That said, I'm glad that Apple gave us a button dedicated to the camera, but my biggest issue is that I keep forgetting that it exists. Let's move on. The new photographic styles on the iPhone 16 are a game changer. Earlier this year, I wanted to expand my photography and got myself a Fujifilm X-T3. And my favorite feature on this real camera are the film simulation recipes that I can add to a photo. The new photographic styles are to iPhones what the film simulations are to the Fujifilm camera. There are many photographic styles to choose from, 14 in total. All of these styles have varying tone, color and palette settings that can be adjusted. But if you were to just apply a style and take a photo with zero adjustment, the photos come out great as the defaults are pretty good. If you dislike the default iPhone photo look, picking a photographic style and then turning on the toggle to preserve the photographic style is the way to go. Apple is basically giving you the freedom and choice to let your photos be however you want them to be. Another great thing about the new photographic styles is that they can be changed after you've taken the photo. You can always go back and change a style if you want to. Personally, I still shoot ProRAW as it offers more flexibility when editing. What I would love maybe in the next iPhone is the ability to shoot both a HEIF with a photographic style and a ProRAW at the same time. I'm sure the A18 Pro can handle this easily, and it looks like a choice that Apple has made for the user to either shoot in HEIF or in ProRAW. If there's one thing I would change about the 16 Pro Max, it would be the ability to shoot both at the same time. During the iPhone 16 keynote, Apple spent a lot of time talking about camera control, but I think the greatest iPhone camera related feature this year are the new photographic styles. Just like the photos, the videos look very similar to the 15 Pro Max from last year. The one new thing this year is that now you can shoot 4K at 120 frames per second. Annoyingly, this is only limited to the Fusion lens, so you can shoot 4K 120 at only 1x or 2x, but not 0.5x or 5x. I can't think of another time Apple limited certain video features to a single lens. In the past, all video-related upgrades and new features have been applicable to all lenses. I believe this has something to do with the faster sensor on the main lens. I'm hoping this comes to all lenses in future iPhone. I haven't had a chance to play with the new studio quality microphones that Apple was demoing during the keynote, but let me just say, this whole video you're watching right now, the audio is from the iPhone 16 Pro Max. So there's no headphones or there's no third-party mic. I'm holding my iPhone on my hand while narrating this. Let me know what you think of this audio. We are on iOS 18.2 at the moment, and there's a lot more Apple Intelligence related features to come. At the moment, I really like the notification summary feature as it seems to work for me, even though most people haven't had any luck. My favorite feature is Cleanup in the Photos app, which works great at cleaning up photos. And if you ask me, it works better than Adobe Lightroom. There is a lot more promised Apple Intelligence related features yet to come. I'll make a full video on it when iOS 18 drops around March or April next year. But as of today, Apple Intelligence as a whole is kinda underwhelming if you ask me. Siri is still as bad as it was, but I'm hoping these things do get better gradually. The iPhone 16 Pro Max is an iteration of the 15 Pro Max, and there's no drastic design change. But it is not a big deal. There's no reason to do something drastic every 2 years. The smartphone and the iPhone has now matured as a device. When a product category matures, a major upgrade every year is not going to be feasible. Looking at the 15 Pro Max from last year, it looks like not much has changed. But compare the 16 Pro Max with the 14 Pro Max and the list of upgrades look longer. Or compare it with the 12 Pro Max and the list of upgrades is even longer. The 16 Pro Max has some quality of life upgrades over last year's phone, like the faster wireless charging, the faster Fusion camera sensor, or even the 1 nit brightness. These might not look like big upgrades, but in daily use of the phone, they all add up. For those of us enthusiastic about tech, we expect a big upgrade every year, and this year that's not it. But I can assure you, Apple is already working on the next big upgrade for the iPhone. And in the meantime, all that matters is that every year there's something that gradually iterates on the iPhone. As long as there are yearly updates to the product line, people have a choice of upgrading or not. Most people are sensible, they don't upgrade to the latest iPhone every year. The older your current iPhone is compared to the 16 Pro Max, the longer the list of upgrades are. You can only get to an iPhone 10 by making the original iPhone. You can only get to the next big iPhone update by iterating yearly. People who want to and can afford to will upgrade and others won't. iPhones have matured now. A sign of maturity is that you don't have to upgrade yearly. But if you do decide to upgrade, you gain the benefits. And if you don't, your old iPhone is still a great device. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.